Today, we're going to unravel a story that, believe it or not, connects medieval tax dodges with modern family justice. It's a legal drama that's been hundreds of years in the making, and it all snaps into focus with one truly shocking headline.
Just imagine reading this. Wife left without even a spoon. It's a real punch to the gut, isn't it? But this isn't just some old news story. This was the spark that lit a legal firestorm in Canada, and it forced everyone to ask a really tough question about the difference between what's legal and what's fair.
So let's start with the story behind that headline. This is the story of Irene Murdoch and a court decision that just felt wrong. And here it is, from 1973. This case, Murdoch versus Murdoch, it would become a landmark. But not for the justice it delivered, no, for the injustice it exposed. It basically put the entire legal system on trial in the court of public opinion.
And you can really feel that injustice when you look at the facts. For a quarter of a century, Irene Murdoch wasn't just a wife, she was a full-on business partner. She worked that family ranch, doing everything, haying, raking, branding cattle. She even put her own money into it. But when the marriage ended, the Supreme Court of Canada looked at the legal title, saw only her husband's name, and said she was entitled to, well, nothing. Not a single penny of the wealth that she had worked her entire adult life to create. So you have to ask yourself, how on earth could this happen? How could a legal system that's supposed to be built on justice lead to a result that is so obviously, so profoundly unfair? Well, to answer that, we've got to go way, way back in time.
And this gets us right to the heart of the problem, a centuries-old tug-of-war between two totally different ideas of what the law is even supposed to do. Okay, so think of it like this. You have these two competing forces in our legal system. On one side, you've got the common law. It's all about rigid rules, strict precedents. It's predictable for sure, but it can be really inflexible. On the other side, you've got something called equity. Now, equity isn't a book of rules. It's a set of principles. Its entire purpose is to step in when those strict rules lead to a bad result to correct an injustice. The Murdoch case was a textbook example of rigid common law just steamrolling fairness. You know, back in its early days, equity was actually pretty controversial. This famous quote gives you a sense of why. Critics felt it was just too subjective, that it all depended on the personal conscience of the judge, the chancellor. One judge's idea of fairness could be totally different from another's. But that same flexibility, that would eventually become its greatest strength. So, faced with these super strict medieval common laws, what do? Well, you get creative. People invented an absolutely ingenious workaround to get a little fairness and flexibility for their families. They called it the use, and the concept is simple, but for its time, it was revolutionary. It separates legal ownership from what we call beneficial ownership. So one person holds the official title to the land, but they are obligated by those principles of equity to manage it for the benefit of someone else.
Okay, let's break down how this brilliant little hack worked. Let's say a landowner, we'll call him A, wants to provide for his daughter, C, but under the law, she can't own land. So he transfers the property to his trusted friend, B, with one simple instruction. This is to the use of C. Now, the common law courts, they would only see B as the owner. End of story. But the court of equity would step in, see the moral duty, and force B to honor the deal for C. It was an amazing end run around the entire legal system.
And as you can imagine, people went nuts for this. The use became incredibly popular. It was a way to support family members who couldn't legally own property. It gave you more control over inheritance. But let's be honest, the biggest reason? It was a fantastic way to avoid paying feudal taxes to the king. And that became a very big problem for the crown. So the king was not a happy camper about this massive tax loophole. His reaction, and the super clever response from England's lawyers, would accidentally lead to one of the most powerful legal tools we have today. And the king, of course, was Henry VIII. He's looking at all this revenue just bypassing the royal treasury, and he is determined to shut it down. He didn't see the use as a tool for protecting families. He saw it as a direct attack on his bottom line. So here's how this legal chess match played out. The use gets really popular. Then, in 1535, Henry VIII brings down the hammer with something called the Statute of Uses, a law designed to kill it off for good. And for a little while, it looked like the game was over. But then, just a couple of decades later, the lawyers found a loophole in the loophole killer. It was just a brilliant piece of legal jujitsu.
lawyers started writing deeds that said, I grant this land to B, to the use of C, to the use of D. And the courts decided that Henry VIII's new law only applied to that first use, so that moved legal title to C. But then the statute's power was all used up, it was exhausted, it had nothing to say about the second use, which left the Court of Equity totally free to enforce C's obligation to D. And just like that, the modern trust was born.
Okay, so let's hit the fast-forward button a few hundred years, right back to the 20th century, and Irene Murdoch's story. That same spirit of equity, born from medieval land fights, was about to make a huge comeback. And the tool for this comeback is the remedial constructive trust, which is basically the modern evolution of the use. Now, this isn't something people set up in advance. It's a solution, a remedy that a court imposes after the fact to fix an injustice. Its whole point is to stop one person from being unjustly enriched at someone else's expense. And the contrast here is it's night and day. Only 7 years after the Murdoch decision, the Supreme Court heard the case of Rosa Becker. Her story was almost identical. She worked for nearly 20 years, without pay, to build a successful business with her partner. But his name was on everything. This time, though, the outcome was completely different, because the court finally decided to use its power in equity. The court essentially said, look, he may have held the legal title, but he was holding her share of the business in a constructive trust for her. Equity recognized her as the rightful beneficial owner of half of the assets she helped build. It was a massive, game-changing shift. 50%. That number says it all, right? That's the real-world impact. That's what fairness looked like in a courtroom. It wasn't about the name on a piece of paper anymore. It was about recognizing contribution and stopping a terrible injustice. You can draw a straight line from medieval landowners trying to protect their daughters to Rosa Becker getting her fair share of a modern business. Honestly, the public outcry after the Murdoch case forced the courts to find a better way. And so they reached back into the long history of equity and unleashed the power of the trust to deliver justice when the strict rules wouldn't. The law didn't just change, it grew up, it evolved. It's an incredible story, isn't it? How a legal trick designed to dodge feudal taxes became this powerful tool for modern justice. And it really leaves you wondering, what's the next big challenge that's going to force our laws to evolve all over again?